Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. In this course, you have studied what are solid waste, their composition, their characteristics and their generation rates. The another aspect of this course is the disposal and management of solid waste. For the management of solid waste, a number of methods are used by people, and the most commonly used methods are open dumping and open burning. But these both the approaches are not recommended by the scientific community, because these leads to spreading of diseases and environmental pollution. In addition to this, a number of other methods such as incineration, landfilling, composting, vermicomposting, recycling, biomethanation, pyrolysis, etc. have been recommended for the management of solid waste. If we look on other hand, due to intensive agricultural, our agricultural fields are not having the sufficient amount of carbon. As a result of that, there are chances that the carbon content may go low day by day, and that may threaten our food security. So, taking these two factors into account, one is the management of solid waste and other one is the maintenance of the nutrient level in agricultural fields. The scientists have recommended that if we do the composting of our solid waste, the solid waste can be converted into a very valuable manure, and that valuable manure can be used in our agricultural field, and this can help us to maintain the food security as well as the health of our agricultural fields. The learning objectives of this module are that what is composting, what are the properties of the compost, what are different phases of the composting process, what are different steps which are carried out during composting, what are the optimum conditions required for the good composting, what are different composting technologies, and what technological options have been suggested for the composting in rural areas of India. Any type of discarded and unwanted waste generated by animals or human activities is referred as solid waste. Solid waste arise from domestic, industrial or commercial activities in a given area, can be classified based on their material contents such as plastic, paper, glass, metal and organic waste, on the hazardous potential such as radioactive nature, flammability, infectious nature, toxicity or non-toxicity, as well as on the basis of origin such as industrial waste, domestic waste, commercial waste, institutional waste or construction and demolition waste. The functional component of waste management system include waste generation, means we have to identify the type of materials present in the waste, on-site handling, storage and processing of waste, waste collection, waste transfer and transport, waste processing and recovery and disposal of waste. As I told in the beginning that a number of safe disposal methods have been suggested for the management of solid waste. Some of the methods which are recommended and commonly used for the purpose of solid waste management are incineration, pyrolysis, composting, recycling and landfilling, and today we are going to discuss in detail about the composting of solid waste. What is composting? Composting is the process of decomposition or degradation of the waste, in which waste is progressively broken down by the living microorganisms. The degraded product or the final product which we get in this process is called as compost. This compost contains very important plant nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, and this compost can be a very useful product for our agricultural fields to maintain the soil health and sustainability. The composting process can be of different types or can be classified in a number of ways depending upon the oxygen supply, temperature and technology used. On the basis of oxygen supply, composting can be of two types, aerobic composting and anaerobic composting. Aerobic composting is carried out in the presence of oxygen, in which aerobic microbes oxidize organic matter into carbon dioxide, nitrates and nitrite. Carbon is used as a source of energy and nitrogen is recycled in this process. In anaerobic composting, anaerobic microbes break down organic matter through the process of reduction. Here methane and carbon dioxides are produced in the process. Based on temperature, composting can be of two types, mesophilic composting and thermophilic composting. In mesophilic composting, the process is carried out in the range of 25 to 45 degree Celsius temperature. When the temperature is more than 55 degrees Celsius, then the process is called as thermophilic composting. On the basis of technology also, the composting process is of two types. One is called as windrow composting and second is called as mechanical composting. When the composting process is carried out in open, then it is called as windrow composting, whereas when the composting process is carried out in the enclosed spaces, then the process is called as mechanical composting. If we come to the properties of the compost is generally black brown to black in color with earthy odor. Black color indicate that it contains good quantities of the humic acid. pH of the compost is generally neutral and in the range of 6.5 to 7.5. The compost should neither be dry, lumpy or very watery. The level of nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus should be more than 1% each. The CN ratio of the compost should be in the range of 15 to 20, because CN ratio is an indicator of the stabilization of the waste. If the CN ratio is in the range of 15 to 20, we can say the waste is stabilized. Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India has drafted the standards for the compost. The standards for the heavy metals are given here. The maximum acceptable limit for arsenic is 20 milligram per kilogram, for cadmium is 20 milligram per kilogram, for chromium the maximum acceptable limit in the compost is 300 milligram per kilogram, whereas for copper and lead the maximum acceptable limit is 500 milligram per kilogram. For mercury, the acceptable limit is 10 milligram per kilogram. For nickel, the acceptable limit is 10 milligram per kilogram, and for zinc, the maximum acceptable limit is 2500 milligram per kilogram of the compost. If we look at the process of composting, in this process microbes are allowed to feed on the organic matter, and in this process they produce humus, that also called as compost, water, carbon dioxide and heat. Composting is having three phases. One is mesophilic phase, second is thermophilic phase and third is maturation phase. Mesophilic phase lasts for a couple of days and the temperature in this phase remains about 40 degree Celsius. Thermophilic phase lasts for few days to several months, and in this phase temperature remains somewhere 55 degrees Celsius to 65 degree Celsius, whereas the maturation phase is cooling and curing phase and it may also last for several months. In the process of composting, different types of microorganisms are involved, but the major microorganisms which are involved in the process of composting are mesophilic and thermophilic bacteria. Along with these mesophilic and thermophilic bacteria, actinomycetes, fungi, protozoa and rotifers also play an important role in the process of composting. If we discuss about different phases of the composting, the first phase is mesophilic stage. This is the first stage of composting. At the beginning of the composting process, the mesophilic bacteria proliferate and increase the temperature of the pile or heap to 45 degree Celsius. The mesophilic bacteria can even include E. coli and other bacteria from the human intestine tract. This stage lasts for a couple of days, after which the temperature of the pile increases up to 55 degree Celsius or higher. Henceforth, the thermophilic bacteria takes over the compost pile. Once the thermophilic bacteria appears, then the thermophilic stage or thermophilic phase starts. This is the second stage of the composting process. In this process, thermophilic microorganisms are very active and produce a lot of heat. The temperature goes up to 70 degrees Celsius. Such high temperature lasts only for few days. It remains localized in the upper portion of the pile where the fresh material is being added. At this high temperature, the disease causing organism as well as weeds of seeds of weeds are killed. Hence, the compost so produced is free from diseases as well as weed seeds. Even the humic acid production take place at this temperature. Humic acid helps plant to assimilate nutrient. Higher the temperature, faster will be the composting process. And the third phase is the maturation phase, that also called as cooling and curing phase. During this phase, the microorganism that were replaced by the thermophilic regain the piles, once the temperature will come down, the mesophilic microorganism will reappear in the pile. These microbes help in digesting the coarser and more resistant organic particles. Fungi and microorganisms that break the coarser elements down into humus also invade and move back into the piles. Curing period is an important phase in composting process because immature compost may be harmful to plants. Uncured compost can produce phytotoxins as they rob the soil of oxygen and nitrogen, and can contain high levels of organic acids which may be harmful to the plants. A long curing period adds a safety net for pathogen destruction. Many human pathogens only have a limited period of viability in the soil, and the longer they are subjected to the microbiological competition of the compost pile, the more likely they will die a swift death. This flow diagram shows the overall steps of the composting process. So, the very first step of the composting process is examining the feedstock or the solid waste. The feedstock which you use in the process of composting should be free from the toxic materials, because if toxic materials are present in the feedstock, they may kill the microorganism, as well as the compost which ultimately will be produced may not be useful to be used in agricultural feeds. The second step after examining the feedstock is the preparation of the feedstock or the solid waste for the purpose of composting. During this step, we do the segregation, shredding of the waste material. In the segregation, we remove any kind of inert material which is present in the waste, and in addition to this, we add some nutrients also which are required for the proper growth of the microorganisms. After this, the waste goes to the active composting process. In the active composting process, microorganisms do their activity, means they feed on the waste and convert it into compost. After active composting, we again screen the compost which is produced in the pile, and we recover any material which is not composted or which is bigger in size. These uncomposted material, we again send them back to the feedstock, so that these can again be sent for the active composting, whereas the compost which is produced, that we send for curing, and from the curing it goes for the final screening. In the final screening also, we remove the materials which are not converted into compost, or any inert material such as bricks etc. are also removed at this stage. After the final After the final screening, material goes to the storing section. Over there it is bagged and it is stored for the stabilization, and finally we get finished compost that can be sent to the market for selling, or that can be sent to the agricultural field for the use. The optimum conditions which we have to maintain for the purpose of composting are pH. The pH of the waste should be in the range of 6.5 to 8. If pH is more than 8.5 or 9, that time nitrates may be converted into ammonia. So, that may lead to loss of nitrogen from the compost. The oxygen level should be maintained 13 to 18% during the process. At any stage, it should not be less than 6%. The waste should be of an optimum size. If the waste is very small in size, then the compaction of waste may take place, and due to compaction of the waste, there are chances that process may get converted into anaerobic process, as there will not be air space. And if the waste size is very big, that time microorganism will not be having the sufficient surface area for their action. So, the particle size of the waste or the raw material should be in the range of 30 to 50 mm. There should be 40 to 60% free air space. So, the process remains aerobic. CN ratio, which is an important parameter, that should be in the range of 25 to 30:1 during the active composting, and 18 to 23:1 during the curing, and from 15 to 20:1 during the storage stage. As this is a microbial process, so we have to maintain the moisture. The moisture content should be in the range of 55 to 65 during the active composting, 45 to 55% during the curing phase, and 40 to 45% during the storage phase. The temperature should be 55 to 60 degrees Celsius in the active composting phase, less than 50 degrees Celsius during the curing stage, and temperature be maintained at ambient level during the storage phase. Yes, now we will discuss different composting technologies, because composting process is carried out in a number of ways. One method of composting is called as static pile. When we do this composting, the first step is the feedstock preparation. In the feedstock preparation, we reduce the size and we do the mixing of the waste. The pile or the windrow of composting material receives minimum turning, that is 1 to 4 turning and aeration. It takes longer to produce a finished compost product than with other technologies. In case providing mechanical aeration, that is forced air, it becomes an aerated static pile. Aeration reduces the processing time required for the composting. An aerated static pile system can be enclosed in a building also. A finished product can typically be produced in 12 to 18 months in the static pile. The another method of composting is windrow composting. Here also the first step is feedstock preparation. As mentioned earlier, in the feedstock preparation we do size reduction and mixing of the waste. Large piles or windrows of composting material is composted outdoor on a paved or unpaved surface. Aeration and mixing is provided with a payloader or specialized windrow turner. This method for composting is particularly preferred for leaf and yard waste, but food waste can also be composted outdoors. Care must be taken to ensure the process is properly managed. Additional aeration, that is the mechanical aeration, can also be provided in the open windrows. Off gases generated during the composting process can be collected and treated using a biofilter. A variety of porous organic materials, including a formulation of wood chips, peat, compost, are available in the market as biofilters. A finished product can be produced in 6 to 12 months during the open windrow composting. Enclosed channel composting process. In this type of system, composting takes place in channels. Mixing of organic waste is provided with a specialized automated turner which typically straddles the concrete walled channels on rail or wheels. Additional aeration is provided via a mechanical aeration system. All enclosed channel systems will include some level of feedstock preparation, again the same size reduction and mixing. Materials typically reside in enclosed channel systems from 7 to 28 days. These systems typically employ automated temperature gathering equipments that are thermocouples. These systems include a mechanical off gas removal system and odor abatement infrastructure, that is by filters as told earlier. After discharge from the channel, compost is cured in a separate area, often employing a Windrow type technology. In the enclosed channel composting, the finished product can be produced in 3 to 6 months. In vessel composting is another method of composting. In this type of system, composting takes place in a purpose built container or tunnel. A composting system employing this system will have one or more number of containers. This is a modular system, so additional containers, that is to increase the processing capacity, can be added as required. Aeration is provided via a mechanical aeration system. In all in-vessel systems will include some level of feedstock preparation also. Materials typically reside in in-vessel system for 3 to 14 days. These systems employ sophisticated automated temperature gathering equipments, that is thermocouples. These systems typically include a mechanical off gas removal system and odor abatement infrastructure, that is by filters. After discharge from a composting container, compost is cured in a separate area, often employing a Windrow type technology. The finished product can be made in 3 to 6 months in the in-vessel composting. Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, Government of India, has suggested several technological options for the management of solid waste in the rural areas. These method includes pile method of composting, NADEP method of composting, Bangalore method of composting, Indore method of composting, Coimbatore method of composting, vermicomposting, thermophilic composting and biogas technologies. Among these, you will study some in other modules. In this module, we will talk about NADEP method, Bangalore method and Indore method. NADEP method of composting. The NADEP method of organic composting was developed by a Gandhian follower, Shri N.D. Pandhari Pandey. In this method, compost can be prepared from a wide range of organic materials, including dead plant material such as crop residues, weeds, forest litter, cattle dung and kitchen waste. In this method of making compost involves the construction of a simple rectangular brick tank with enough space maintained between the bricks for necessary aeration. The size of the tank is 3 meter into 1.8 meter or 3.6 meter into 1.5 meter internally, with 25 centimeter thick perforated brick wall all around in mud or cement mortar to a height of 0.9 meter above ground. The above ground perforated structure facilitate passage of air for aerobic decomposition of the solid waste or the materials which are taken in this bin. The floor of the tank is laid with bricks. The ingredients or the raw materials for making compost are agro waste, animal dung and soil in the ratio of 45:5:50 by weight. The ingredients are added in layers starting with vegetable matter followed by dung and soil in that order. Each layer can be of about 45 kilogram vegetable matter, 5 kilogram of dung mixed with some 70 liters of water and 50 kilogram of soil. So, you can make up to 30 layers in the tank. To maintain the NADEP bin, the number of layers can be reduced. You can have even 15, 10 or 20 layers. After 50 to 30 days of filling the organic biomass in the tank gets automatically processed down to 2 feet. The tank is refilled by giving 2 to 3 additional layers over it and is resealed. After this filling, the tank is not disturbed for about 3 months. When organic matters are almost completely degraded by the help of different groups of microorganisms, about 25 to 50 liters of water is to be sprinkled twice a week after the tank is fully loaded. This slide shows two figures. The first figure is a brick bin prepared for the purpose of composting using NADEP method. The second is a line diagram in which it is shown that how we will make the different layers of the waste in the NADEP method, and the roof of this NADEP tank is always thatched type. The another method of composting is Bangalore method of composting. Bangalore method of composting was developed by Acharya in 1939 for the composting of the town refuse or night soil. This night soil is human fecal matter. This process also called as hot fermentation method of composting or the Bangalore method. This method is anaerobic in nature and carried out in pits. Initially, the waste is anaerobically stabilized in pits where alternate layers of organic waste and animal dung are laid. The pit method of making compost conserves moisture, so it is useful in area with low rainfall and a long dry season. It should not be used in wet areas as the compost may become waterlogged. In this method, we dig a pit 4 feet wide and 2 feet deep, built a pile in the pit using the same method as in the NADEP method. We can add little water if necessary. The pit is completely filled and a final soil layer is laid to prevent the fly breeding entry of rainwater into the pit. The material is allowed to decompose for 4 to 6 months, after which the stabilized material is taken out and used as compost. The Bangalore method requires longer time for stabilization of material and hence needs longer land spaces. The gases generated in this anaerobic process also pose smell and odor problems. The another method for the rural areas is Indore method of composting. This process was developed by Howard and Ward in 1931 at Indore, Madhya Pradesh. This method is aerobic in nature. In this method, waste materials such as plant residues, animal waste, weeds, street refuse and other organic waste can be composted. The waste materials are cut into smaller pieces and spread in layers of 10 to centimeter thickness, either in pit or in heap of 1 meter width, 1 meter depth and of convenient length. It is properly moistened with cow dung using earth. Periodically 3 to 4 turnings are given to the waste material to maintain aerobic conditions during the composting. This method of composting in pits involves filling of alternate layers of similar thickness as in Bangalore method. We have to give the turning in this process to maintain the aerobic conditions. The first turning is manually given 4 to 7 days after filling the waste material in the pit. The second turning is given after 5 to 10 days, 5 to 10 more days. Third turning is given after 5 to 10 days. Further turning is normally not required and the compost is ready in 4 to 5 weeks. In this method, odorous gases are not generated. It is environment friendly and hence commonly preferred in the rural areas for the composting of different wastes. Students, to sum up, in this module we have learned that what is composting, how the process of composting is carried out, what are different phases of the composting and what are different types of composting and what are different composting methods used in the rural areas. Among them, we have studied in detail about NADEP method, about Bangalore method and about Indore method. If you want to study more about the composting, a number of good videos are available on the YouTube, and by watching those videos you can learn that how we can do the composting of solid waste. Thank you.